Hello from the sidelines of the Tulane Corporate Law Institute here in New Orleans. I'm Jarrett Banks, editor at large of CorpGov. Joining me today is Brendan Fu, the co-CEO and co-founder of Forward Risk. Brendan, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here.
Great, so let's get right into it. How should activists be proactively investigating their board nominees before going public?
Yeah, the thing about this is activists are the first mover in many cases. By the time they start engaging with the company, by the time they start engaging with other shareholders, they know that they're going to do it. So we advise them to come to us early in the process to figure out what's going on in the board, what's going on in the incumbent board of directors, the management team, and to use that as either the basis for or to use that to help fuel the case for change that they're making. Very often activists go in having done a lot of due diligence in other ways. They've done financial diligence, they've worked with experts in various areas. Well, one thing that we have seen them sometimes not do or think that perhaps it's not as relevant or useful is to do a deep dive investigation on the people running the company. And I think that's got some pretty potentially disastrous effects later on down the road. Imagine you're spending a couple $1 million, you put together a fantastic advisory team, you've got the best lawyers, the best proxy solicitors, the best PR firms, the best financial advisors, and you've got say 4 nominees who you think are really strong. You put your nominees forward, and suddenly the other side, which we know are going to be doing the diligence, going to be investigating the nominees, they find cracks in the armor. They find issues in their past.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the issues maybe you could explain away. Some of the issues are a lot harder to explain away. Regulatory sanctions, criminal matters, major underperformance or corporate governance issues, independence issues, for example, conflict issues. Well, what do you do then? Do you go out to the market and go, oh, whoopsie, I picked the wrong guy. Let's pick someone else. At that point, it's almost too late. An activist can put forth a very, very strong argument for change, but it comes down to, well, what is the sort of mode of the conflict going to be, right? Where is the battleground in which it's going to be played out? And that battleground is really, the nominees and whether or not they're going to get elected. If you're putting forward a nominee that's not as useful, not as good, then you've just cut away, that one sliver of hope to get your case for change across. And we also think that this has potential meta effects.
Mm-hmm.
You look at, say, an activist who the market believes has done their due diligence, but if they haven't necessarily diligenced all their directors adequately, then it might lead to other questions around, well, how sound is their strategy for change maybe? Or in the future, could this be something that gets used against them?
Mm-hmm.
If the other side is saying, yeah, these guys aren't really serious. They're just, to quote a famous lawyer on the defense side, gadflies, right? I think a big part of activists showing their own investors and the rest of the market that they're serious is making sure that every single step of that process that they take, they do so with the highest levels of thoughtfulness, mindfulness, and in this case, vetting the nominees.
Right, because in your mind, like one bad nominee, can that undermine the entire slate?
I think it could, right? Because it goes to whether or not they're serious about doing it. The cost for doing, a background investigation on one nominee, we like to say that we put out extremely good value versus what we cost. But the cost of doing one is really not that high when you consider the fact that it really is a sign of their seriousness, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a sign of whether or not they've done all the necessary steps that have led up to that process of going public and taking it to a fight. The question really is, okay, if they've not done this, or they've missed that, or they've cut corners here, are they cutting corners elsewhere? Then you start getting into questions around, well, do we know if they've done everything they're supposed to? Are they have they actually done all the diligence? Have they actually put together a correct strategy for change? Can we poke holes in their case for change? Well, I think these questions do come up.
How should issuers proactively refresh and diligence their boards to ensure they're strong enough to repel activists?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the word proactive, right? Very often, you come across an issuer who maybe you get a call from an issuer when the activist has gone public with their demands or they're starting to engage. And in those cases, you have an issuer who's only then bringing together the advisory team, only then thinking about, okay, what do we do now on a rainy day? I will be saying this until I'm blue in the face, hopefully a blue that matches my suit, but I'll be saying this until I'm blue in the face. You gotta get your advisory team together on a clear day. Bring your PR team, bring your lawyers, bring your quarterbacks, your financial advisors, bring your investigators, bring everyone together, your solicitors together, and maybe do a bunch of war games, do some simulations, do some exercises to make sure that you're getting ahead of that issue so that when you have an outsider coming in for the first time, you don't have your advisory team as outsiders as well. They now know how you think. They now are staying ahead of potential vulnerabilities in your board. But it's also important to sort of red team it to some extent, right? Like to have people who know how to think like an activist would, and to have directors and boards think the way activists would. Because when an activist comes calling, they're going to be coming with the full strength of their experience, their advisory teams. They have done it before. Not every board knows how to work with activists. The activists, they can just go to a new company and rerun the process. So it's very important to understand how an activist might think, how an activist might act, because not only does it help you to repel an activist, if you think about the fact that really what's the win condition? The win condition is that everyone wants to make money by bringing the share price up, we think. And so the goal of an activist is not just to take over a board and kind of break a company up for parts. They are trying to unlock some value there. And if you're thinking the way an activist would, then I think invariably you're approaching board refreshment, you're approaching issues around succession, leadership, corporate governance, generally from the perspective of how do I use that as a proxy for increasing total shareholder returns. And so that sort of mindset, that a board could take to itself, that does include, proactively diligencing their board members, proactively wargaming, proactively approaching themselves with a critical eye. I think that's going to only be very useful for boards. The downside, not a lot of boards want to do it because of the cost. But the upside is, once you do have that process in place, when an activist comes calling, you're going to be more prepared than any other issuers are going to be.
So it's really about going beyond a simple check the box background check, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's really understanding how, again, what sort of vulnerabilities an activist might see in you. And a check the box backgrounder, you're going to find like a DUI from when they were in college. You might find someone who went skiing after dark or something silly like that. But really, going beyond that gets you arguments and strategy and actionable intel. So really what you're looking for is intelligence. You're looking for questions or answers or data points like, are they overboarded? Are there significant judgment, character, integrity issues in the directors that you have on the board? Are there independence issues that an activist who is investigating your board might be able to pinpoint and say, the reason you're so poorly run is because no one here has ever put the CEO in a tough spot where he has had to be accountable for his decisions. And so I think a lot of it comes down to just making sure that you're approaching corporate governance in general with a very critical eye, making sure that you're approaching it the way an activist would, because if you're not, someone else is going to be.
Right. Let's talk about the impact of UPC and why director quality matters.
Yeah, I think director quality more so than ever matters because it's now a binary up-down vote on directors. And to get back to our first point, right? Not only are we assessing individual directors for whether or not there's bad stuff going on in their past, you're now looking at whether or not they're individually additive to corporate boards. You're looking at, say you're an activist with a slate of 4 nominees. If 2 of those nominees have exactly the same experience, exactly the same backgrounds, exactly the same skills and qualifications on the matrix, I think it starts becoming harder for them to be able to make the case to shareholders that both of their nominees deserve to be elected onto the board. They have to be viewed not just as individuals now, but as members of a slate, and they all have to individually contribute to that slate. And then it comes back to that overall meta argument about, well, then are they going to be useful enough to push for the case for change in a serious and a convincing way? And it's an inherently political contest sometimes. You need to be able to make the case to shareholders, to the institutional investors, why someone you're putting forward is better than someone who's currently on the board. And so you got to go beyond the surface, and you really got to think about, if you are trying to displace a current director, is your alternative better, and how so?
Okay, this has been Brendan Fu, the co-CEO and co-founder of Forward Risk. I'm Jarrett Banks, signing off from the sidelines of the Tulane Corp Gov Law Institute.